Hello and welcome back to another episode of our Leaders with Purpose podcast. I'm Rebecca Hull, I'm MD here at Manifesto, and I'm here with my wonderful colleague Lou Lai. And today we're joined by Rachael Franklin, who is Chief Engagement Officer at Breast Cancer Now.
Yes, I'm Lou Lai, Chief Client and Transformation Officer at Manifesto, and in this episode of the podcast we talk about a leadership journey, cutting their teeth in telemarketing, taking those learnings on an amazing growth journey of navigating charity mergers, not just one but two, how you don't always have to have every single answer as a leader, and that is actually part of being an amazing leader. And we hear the exciting new 5-year strategy that Breast Cancer Now have just launched. So tune in.
Welcome, Rachael. You are Chief Engagement Officer at Breast Cancer Now, and we're going to use this time to explore a little bit about your journey, your learnings as a leader in the sector along the way.
So I didn't think we would start by talking about Pell & Bale's telemarketing fundraising, which we have a shared history of. That was my first foray into fundraising, working at Bernardo's, working with Pell & Bale's. But I think it's such a lovely story, and I guess the start of your journey in the sector and kind of really driving change. So yeah, for our audiences, what's been your journey into where you are now?
Yeah, well, thanks, Lou. And always like it when I have a shared connection around Pell & Bale's, because it was a really instrumental part of my career and learning about the sector, and also about business partnering, I guess, because I joined Pell & Bale's at a time when they only had a few clients, but really had set their sights on being this exceptional agency, really building and growing telemarketing. And I learned so much, both about just how powerful the telephone was in connecting with the cause, but also the importance of really partnering with your clients and being an extension of your clients when you work agency side. And really, I like to think, honed my skills in that, and felt so passionately about the clients that we worked with at the time. I was there for 5 years or so, and had the opportunity to work on with some amazing clients, Bernardo's, as you said, UNICEF, and also was working with Imperial Cancer Research Fund and Cancer Research Campaign at the time when they merged. It was a really exciting time. And I think what I enjoyed most, and what's something that I've seen throughout my career, is being part of an organisation with really big ambition to grow and being part of that growth journey. That's where I am now at Breast Cancer Now. We've got really big ambition and need to grow. And so some of that early work I did at Pell & Bale's is kind of, I hope, stood me in good stead for, change and growth in Breast Cancer Now.
Amazing. You mentioned about your experience at Pell & Bale's and kind of that sort of being an extension of the team, which actually isn't as, I guess, innate as you would imagine in lots of partnerships. Is that sort of informed your time as a sort of leader in a charity, kind of bringing on partners, that is also what you were looking for and that you sort of value in a sort of partner as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as you say, I realised quite quickly that wasn't just standard. And actually, it was the leadership at Pell & Bale. It was the culture that was created. It was working with some amazing people who are, now brilliant names in our sector, like Paul de Gregorio and Joe Jenkins and many others. But it really was instilled in us that actually we are here for our clients, and actually we need to think about the problems that they have as much as they do. And actually, that was one of the biggest compliments I got working with Cancer Research UK at the time, and saying, you feel like an extension of us. You think in the same way that we do about those challenges. And so I have always looked for that. And, you'll know, Rebecca and Lou, from when we first started working with Manifesto, saying, we really want you to understand our challenges. We really want you to feel it in the same way that we do. And, that's I think, been a big part in how our partnership has grown and developed, and allowed us to deliver great work, but also to get through challenging times as well, because if you know that your agency feels the importance and understands where you're aiming to get to, it really, really helps you work collaboratively and effectively. And, likewise with our brand agency, we've had that. And it's certainly something that I try to think about when we're working with new people, about how we give those partners everything that they need to be able to understand our work and feel that investment. And as I say, we've been really lucky in that partners like Manifesto and others come to our events. They listen to what our supporters say. They want to hear about what people around the organisation think and what their challenges are, not just kind of working on the specific kind of task in hand.
Yeah. And so our journey with Breast Cancer Now started in 2021, and I think it's fair to say that it was like a dream brief. It was so exciting to kind of have that in the building and see it as an opportunity to do something transformative, in the sector, but also for your mission and what you were trying to achieve. And I think, Rebecca, you were newly MD at Manifesto at the time, and for you it wasn't just about a sort of business mission for Breast Cancer Now. It was something more than that.
And we've talked about that, and I've talked about this. I mean, absolutely, it was a dream brief on so many levels, and I think that's what we were sort of communicated from the minute it kind of hit the inbox. We were like, wow, there's so much potential in here to make a difference. And I think for me, it's really interesting when you think about sort of purpose and that sort of lived experience. And I think lots of people that work in the sector will have empathy for lots of causes, but that sort of, you can't deny that when there's a moment of lived experience, that it hits a different nerve. And I shared, and actually shared it quite recently with some new people on the team, that there is a photograph that I have of me and my children. We're quite young, and in it I look quite happy, but what I was about to do was to go to a support group that was being run at the time by Breast Cancer Care, who had newly started a support, sort of running a pilot for women who had the BRCA1 gene mutation, which I have, and I'd had a double mastectomy and reconstruction. So here was this moment where I felt like we can make a difference, and we can really make a difference. And that pivotal moment, that one engagement, changed the course of my relationship with your organisation for the rest of my life. So it's an absolute privilege to sort of be here talking over drills about that. There's lots of similarities in our journeys, I think, as leaders. And there's one I definitely want to go into quite some detail about, which is about kind of mergers and integrations and what does that mean? But just to go back to your early days of Pelham Bales, telemarketing, call centre world, the three of us have been in that.
Yeah.
Do you look back on that time and think, actually, I learned some really fundamental skills? Because I think if you said to a lot of younger generations, your job is to pick up the phone and talk to people and persuade them to do this thing, that there'd be a lot of fear around that. But
No, I agree. And firstly, I just wanted to go back to your point about your, kind of personal connection to breast cancer. And, it's always a really standout moment when we held a panel event about, the impact of breast cancer on body image. And you really openly shared about it. And it felt like such a moment of you, I hope, feeling that we had created a space that you felt able to open that, but really, again, just change that relationship and thinking, this is so important for all of us that we get this right. It's so important that we're listening to people's experience of breast cancer. So that's always a moment that I think we both remember of it being so powerful and reflective of what a close relationship we, have as Breast Cancer Now Manifesto. And I guess just not dissimilar to my answer around what I learned at Pelham Bales. And one of the things was that you could write a script and then you could get it on the call centre floor and you could listen and hear, how is this landing? And I remember, thinking back now, obviously I didn't know what I'd be doing now, but, talking on behalf of Cancer Research UK about what huge progress had been made in breast cancer, and actually survival rates, being so different from 20 years ago. And you'd hear people going, wow, gosh, that's so different to what my experience is. And we'd listen, and then we'd try something different, and how would it land, and how do we engage people? And I think that has been a real common thread for me, in terms of always putting your kind of beneficiaries or your supporters really at the heart, and making sure that you do have those touch points to listen. Because, I know the telephone then went through a bit of bad press, didn't it? But my goodness, in terms of immediate feedback, immediate sense of what you're doing and how that's really landing, was something that I'll, be forever grateful for being in telemarketing for. And, I'm always so appreciative of people that work in telemarketing, because it's really hard, isn't it? It's hard work. But, there's so much good that came from telemarketing in those early days of bringing people closer to the cause. And also now, as I say, being able to just connect with supporters and have those conversations when it works really well. It's really powerful.
I mean, sometimes lived experience is really helpful, and they should absolutely be part of the co-design. And I think for me, I had this really strong sense of my need for information at this time of my life, where I had to make some really rapid decisions, and the role of your organisation in that. And our previous guest we've been talking about kind of girl-centred design, which is very aligned to their mission. And it's sort of in that moment that, what is the real impact, tangible impact that this is having, and the importance of doing that, in your design process, your transformation processes. Yeah. So, my reflection is it must feel like a luxury when you look back now to think you had that person for that length of time on the phone, people's windows of engagement are now so much smaller.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And I guess it's not kind of losing sight of that how technology changes, that actually that connection and that desire for information in a way that really works, it is still what people need when they're going through a diagnosis or treatment. And we've, talk about this a lot at the moment when we're thinking about AI and thinking how transformative it will be. But ultimately, the human problem remains the same, that you want answers, you want support, you want reassurance, and to your point, you want it quickly now, and you want it when you want it. So really coming back to that kind of connection point, I think, is so important in all the work we do.
So coming back to you and your leadership journey, could you sort of bring to life for us, perhaps tell us what's happened as in terms of breast cancer now, the journey that you've been on as an organisation, and what does sort of leadership ask of you today?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Well, I suppose I'm just thinking about my time at Breast Cancer Now. So next year I will have been there for 10 years, which feels ridiculous because it's gone so quickly. But during that time, I've obviously been involved in an awful lot of change. I was first joined when we merged and brought together two research charities, and then subsequently the bringing together of the research charity and then breast cancer care. So my journey was that when I first joined, although I had done a similar job to I do now in terms of fundraising and communications, I actually joined working more in a strategy and insight role to help kind of build the strategy for the new organisation. And that was really helpful and interesting for me, because it allowed me to really dig into that piece around insight and, how you use that to build your strategy and your activities, etc. But also, I didn't have a team as such. So it really honed my skills of how you influence without team. And that's been really helpful in terms of leadership at a more senior level, when actually you just have to, build relationships and influence people to go on the journey, rather than, well, I'm your manager, so therefore you're going to do it or whatever. But at Breast Cancer Now, obviously in my role now, I have responsibility for all of our fundraising portfolio and all of our communications. Of course, digital sits within that. And, I feel as though we're really at the point now that all of those years of change, hard work, difficult decisions around merging and what that means. As we've spoken about, Rebecca, the differences in culture, to a certain extent, how you feel like you go backwards before you go forwards because you have to take the organisation with you and do some of your kind of fundamentals. Actually, now where we are is really the moment to say, this is why we did it.
Yeah.
This is why we had to do it. And, we've just launched our new 5-year strategy that will take us from 25 to 30. And we know in that time that the numbers of people diagnosed will increase, the numbers of people living with a secondary diagnosis will increase. And actually the need for an organisation like Breast Cancer Now that goes across both supporting people now through to thinking about research for a very different future is at its heart. So I think the growth that I've had, or the opportunity I've had to go through and build the organisation in that way towards it, is now kind of coming to fruition and saying, okay, how are we going to execute all the plans that we know we need to deliver? So it's a really exciting time, and it's a real privilege to be in the role that I am, to take us on that next part of our journey. And people internally are really behind it. We have a relatively new chief exec in Claire Rowney, and I'm able to spend quite a lot of time with her, which is fantastic. And she often says, actually the focus of our organisation, that people know what we're here for, what we need to do, is so powerful and will make that journey to deliver on our strategy so much more possible because of our kind of alignment.
When the news was broken that the merger was going to happen, and did you or did the organisation think and plan for it taking the time that it has? Because I totally hear you on, you get to this moment of, and we've had it, Manifesto has been on an integration sort of merger journey too, and it's only in the sort of looking back at this point that you realise how far you've come. But I'm sure at that time there was perhaps sort of hope, anticipation that perhaps some aspects wouldn't have taken quite as long as they have.
Yeah, I think when we merged the first time, and I joined after that had happened, so I didn't share all the pain of leading into it, but bringing together two research organisations, I think, felt like an easier task. When we then brought together a research organisation and a care organisation, that was harder. There were more differences, although we did have more learnings from things that we hadn't necessarily done quite as well the first time, that then allowed us to go, let's not fall into that trap again. So I think the second merger was perhaps more difficult than we maybe anticipated. And, it does take time. I think for us, we then went quite quickly into COVID. So we did the merger in 2019, did a year of transition, and then we were hit by COVID. And actually, for us, that really made us have to make some difficult choices. And probably, for only this reason, it came, at a good time, in that we said, you know what, if we need to survive this and thrive in it, actually, we're going to have to make some hard choices and respond to it. So that probably changed the course a little bit of how our second merger played out. But for sure, it does take time, doesn't it? It does take time.
Yeah, and I think there's something in project management that's kind of called the planning fallacy, which is, I think there's sort of a human propensity to which is ironic because often people are fairly there's sort of negative bias, but there is something about, we can't quite accept that things will either cost as much or take as much time as they do. And I think you've only got to watch Grand Designs to see that people never seem to learn. But it absolutely does, because I think there are just many layers and spirals that you need to kind of go through and loop back round again in to get to the sort of pace of consolidation. But what a feeling when you get there and you think, oh, okay, that all of that forming gone. Like now we're like really are looking forward to the future.
Yeah, and I think, there's something as well when you're working, in a charity or with charities that have been, a smaller organisation, and then they come together. The absolute strength of them is the passion of the people, the belief in the cause, the commitment to what they do, and so all those things that are such strengths, you then have to kind of navigate in a merger situation to get the real benefit, and as quickly as possible that you can agree that shared belief in what's going to be possible together and what your kind of mission is together, the better, because it is difficult when you have two organisations kind of finding their way.
Yeah, it's definitely. We'd like to sort of unpick sort of prioritisation with you, what you choose to do and not to do. But one of so for people listening who are like, well, I'm not merging sort of organisations, we're not on that pathway. But to my mind, there's always some process of kind of like forming and disforming in an organisation, if that's the word, up to forming and unbanding or something, like because we're on, the pace of change means that businesses are restructuring in all sorts of ways through their products and services, through their, organisation model. I guess if you had to sort of distill like one sort of learning that you've taken from your experience of merger and integration of some kind, what would it be?
I suppose it would be that point around being really clear on where you want to get to and what is your North Star, for want of a better phrase, in terms of why. Because when you're having to make really difficult decisions, or where there are different options, actually being able to bring it back to the kind of so what, like we're doing this so that we can get there, or we need to make this change so that that's possible. That's the thing that I've held on to, whether that's in merger time or, as you say, just evolution and change. Actually it's hard, but if you're like, we need to get here, and the more that people are on that journey, again, they might not like it, but I can see where we need to get to for the good of the organisation and the beneficiaries, then that's the thing to hold on to, I've found.
And with your strategy experience, so a big part of like great strategy is the destination, like what is the North Star, where are we trying to get to, and then you make a plan but you pivot the plan because conditions changed. Like, how much of that strategy experience has stood you in good stead to also be able to hold that space of, but it's there that we're getting to that long-term space when you're sort of leading through some of the change programs that you've done?
Well, I'm gonna say it's not easy, and I'd love to give you like the perfect answer of how I do that, and I'm totally like
on mission,
single-minded.
plan.
I know exactly where we're going, but I think one of the really big challenges, again, of working in these amazing organisations that like breast cancer now, is that we all feel the sense of what's needed. I was just saying, in our new strategy, we know that the number of people diagnosed will increase. We know that people aren't getting the support that they need now to work through a diagnosis and their treatment. And so actually your sense of responsibility as to what you need to do, what you need to be, and how you need to be here for people is really strong. And so actually making decisions about what you're not going to do is the hardest thing. And I think for us particularly, like one of the reasons that we wanted to come together and Breast Cancer Now as that fully comprehensive charity is being able to say, whatever it is about breast cancer, we're here. We would, when we were first starting out talking about, our new brand, etc. And with that comes some challenge, because you can't be there for absolutely everything. You have to make some decisions about where you're not going to be or where you're not going to be as much. And, some of the kind of big conversations that we've had as part of this strategy development is, the kind of breadth of what we do versus the depth of what we do, which are all challenges that you have to just kind of work through. And I think there's something around doing that, whatever size of organisation you are, but particularly if you're looking to grow, because then you have to be much more focused on what are the things that are going to give us that reach, is going to enable us to scale. And, that has to be factored into your strategy work.
Yeah. And I guess so if we go back to when we started our journey, it was really clear that the sort of the need in terms of what you were trying to achieve, but also you could see the potential that digital and technology was going to have in actually helping you reach more people, deliver those services, like have the impact, because you just could not keep up with the rate of, diagnosis. And so like what was the journey to getting that funding, kind of bringing people on the journey, and then kind of then implementing that transformation in digital, which wasn't an overnight thing. We're talking years in the making of the stuff that we've been trying to do together.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, like, in reality, like, I won't say we wouldn't have any idea, but I don't think we would have thought at that point when we said this is what we want to achieve, that we would have envisaged just how much work we needed to do, but actually what was possible with what we could do together. So when I think back to that point, I think for sure we said, right, okay, we've cobbled together our digital offering over. It's more than cobbled together, but like we've reskinned our website. Actually, now is the time that what we really want to do is really think about, how we can be there for people affected by breast cancer, what role our digital channels play in that, and our website needs to be really a core platform in that. But actually, then that grew, didn't it? And over time, that has really grown into, not only kind of how our website is integrated, but what else that means, what else we could be doing, etc. So I do think it's definitely been a journey and will continue to be, won't it? Because now we're going into, different conversations about all our digital offers, etc. So, but it was a big moment, and I think some of it was myself and great team members saying, you know what, if we do really want to show up as this expert in breast cancer, the kind of we're here for you, actually we need to invest in our digital infrastructure, and actually our website has to be that place. And I really remember talking to you early on saying, we want to feel like people come to us and they know they're going to get what they need, and we can give the information and the support that people are looking for. So I don't think at the start we knew the size and scale of it, but my goodness, what an amazing journey we've been on and continue to go on.
Yeah. And I think even in those early days, and we talk about lived experience, like the experience principles that sort of were informed, co-designed, they stick with me to this day, me and my milestone, where meeting me, what I need, where I am in my journey as someone who is being diagnosed, but also you might be someone who's supporting someone, and just seeing the sort of the passion that breast cancer now, but also, like you say, the focus, like we have to deliver the most impact for the most people, and our digital experience actually needs to be at a level. It's not just an okay charity website. Like we are talking about a holistic digital experience that really understands all of the touch points in people's journey, and that sort of insight and kind of discovery. Like I still remember the presentation like it was yesterday, and it was many years ago.
I know. It was a real eye-opener, wasn't it, around actually what we need to do, what's possible, but how much we need to kind of work and collaborate on that to make it happen.
And so you touched a little bit on around technology, and really exciting in the sector. There's a lot of conversation, right, about AI. What role is it going to play in terms of like meeting needs, freeing up resources? But at Breast Cancer Now, you've got a really great approach and strategy for how you're kind of thinking about AI and the team. It'd be great to kind of unpack a little bit for our audience, kind of where you're at with it.
Yeah, certainly. Well, I think first to say, and again, like just as a leader, is recognizing when you need great people in your team to do certain things, and how that is going to help you take that next step. And I think we came to that point at Breast Cancer Now thinking, actually, if we need to really move the dial here, actually we need to think differently about our resourcing, our capacity and capability, etc. So, I've got an amazing director of digital and data in Kath Biddle, who of course you know well, and actually thinking about always from a perspective of who we're here for. So Kath will always say, as we try and say consistently internally, this is about dealing with the human challenges, not putting AI first, but actually what's the problem we're trying to solve, and actually what role can AI play in that. And so we've done some kind of quite, I guess, foundational structural work around, processes and policies and assessing kind of where we're at, but also outlining a journey of like where we want to get to and what that might look like. A huge part of that is organisational confidence, understanding, building skills, not just around, and all of this, the technical side of it, but helping people to be curious and open and think about doing things differently, or thinking about the challenges they have or that our supporters and beneficiaries have, and how we could think differently about technology playing a part in that. Now we're looking at a new role around a senior lead in AI. We've got so much excitement and ambition internally around how AI can help us to deliver our strategy, to deliver at scale, to free us up to do more things that are really value adding. And I think, again, just talking about the skills that you need around there, yeah, absolutely, it's great technical people, but it's also a leader that will listen to like, what's the challenge? How might we get there? What might we do it? And then how can technology support us in that? So I think that's served us really well so far. Of course, it's going to be a massive learning journey, isn't it, in terms of keeping on top of like changes and trends and what it means for our organisation. But I think, again, like as a leader, just trying to be really open to that and recognising when you can take the team that you have with you and when you need to call in expertise, like what do you do yourself versus where you lean on others for input. And so that's the kind of dynamic that we're in at the moment.
Yeah, I just have to say kudos to Kath and you and your team. I was with Dr. Kath Biddle last week at the Charity Digital AI Summit, and what I was really struck by is there's lots of conversation in the room about the adoption of AI, lots of questions. For the record, no one's got it sorted. Everyone's got more questions than answers. But what came across really clearly was a narrative that I hadn't heard as sort of gracefully articulated, is about what can this do to amplify our service? And we were talking about, the changes and that you could make in a process around your kind of nurse service and information service, and actually introducing elements of AI into that process. You're still keeping the human in the loop.
Absolutely.
They're ultimately still making the decisions, checking the information, but by looking at the lens of actually this helps us answer more queries, get to more people, therefore it's a good thing. And it was such a compelling narrative, very humble actually, but you could really see people in the room start to wake up to, oh, there's potential here that's beyond me just writing a brief or writing some content for the website, that actually let's think about this through a much sort of wider AI for kind of good lens.
Absolutely. And I think, for a long time we've talked about like the amazing support offer that we have in various ways, but how do we scale it? How can we, and we know when we were, looking at our strategy just at the start a couple of years ago, saying it won't work in this same model. You'd need too many people, too much money, all of that thing. And so what's really exciting is to be able to say exactly as you've described, Rebecca, like how can we take what we know works really brilliantly for our supporters or our beneficiaries and do it in a way that we can scale it, or do it in a way that it's more efficient. And so that's, in a way, it sounds like a strange thing to say, but it's also less intimidating for people. So it's not like, blimey, everything that we do has to be totally different. It's about how can we use AI and technology more broadly to really kind of focus on those things that we do brilliantly and scale it or improve it or make it even more effective for the people it's there for. So yeah, for sure, like human in the loop is 100% our mantra, and thinking about what's the problem we're trying to solve before going straight to like, this is a great new tool, this would be exciting. Thinking, what is it that we need to do that really keeps us on track, and how can we use AI and technology in that?
Yeah, it was a use case that I'd heard that just felt really core to your mission and organisation's mission. And yeah, I think you should give yourself some gold stars, because I think like you are breaking new ground in that way.
Yeah, well, definitely Kath. Kath is an absolute star, and I know that my role is to be able to facilitate and enable her and her team to make the changes that we need to be able to, do the great work that we know we can, and kind of focus on that. So I think we're in a really exciting place, actually.
So new strategy.
Yes.
What is, like, you've got the foundations, you've invested, like, you've personally been through this whole, almost decade-long journey of getting to this beginning of a new chapter. And so what's next for the organisation? What exciting things are coming up that you're like, I cannot wait for this to happen, and it's going to, really change or turn the dial on something?
Yeah, no, I do feel really excited about our new strategy. It's been an amazing process developing it, just really putting, our beneficiaries and our supporters really at its heart. We had our breast cancer voices who were integral in the whole process. And so we really feel as though we haven't just sat in a room and done it ourselves. And a couple of things. And as I said, working with Claire Rowney, who came in and started the strategy straight away, has been a really exciting way to work. But thinking about what's our lane, where are we best placed to do the things that we can best do, is the first thing. But also the second thing is, sometimes when you work for a long time on a strategy and you're really proud of yourself and you've got this fancy new strategy and it's got loads of good words in it, and then people across the organisation are like, so what's different? What is it? And actually, that's really important. They were like, what is the change that we need to see? And so the strategy itself is called Change Happens Now, which we love because it's really active, it's really powerful, and it really talks to the fact that change does need to happen now. We've talked before about breast cancer is not a done deal, and it's absolutely true. Change is needed. But to that point then, we said, what are the game changers? What do we really need to change in the next 5 years? And focusing on 5 different areas and saying, this is where we've got to move the dial, I think is really powerful. So, like, just as an example, I won't go through all of the elements of our strategy, but, saying that when you're going through a breast cancer diagnosis, we need to be there for people with an offer of support, whatever that is. To what extent people need support? Is it in person? Is it a digital offer? Is it, someone at the end of the phone? But making sure that we are genuinely here for the growing number of people affected by breast cancer is really key. But also, we know that, we hear again and again that when people finish their treatment, they feel as though they've dropped off a cliff in terms of the support they get, in terms of what they're told about what's next or how to live their life, go back to normal, which people sometimes feel that they're assumed will happen. And so us really playing a really proactive interventionist role at that end of treatment to support people to understand what signs and symptoms of secondary might be is another really kind of bold game changer that we feel that we have to really focus on. So some really big shifts in strategy, some real focus for us in terms of where we want to change the game for breast cancer, but also from a fundraising communications perspective, really exciting things. We've been looking at our brand, our visual identity, and thinking, is this fit for purpose? Does it say determined leader? That is what we absolutely need to be and how we need to show up. So work on our brand that will be launching next spring. We've got growth planned in our income. We want to get to 100 million over the course of our strategy, which we have kind of mapped out our route to get there and feel really confident in being able to achieve that. A part of that is running a major campaign. So lots of really exciting things. And those are just the things that we know about. I mean, there's all sorts of things that are going to happen, because one of the things that we really feel at the moment is this real momentum that we have both internally but also externally around this need for change and around needing to evolve, meet the growing demand, be there for people, be in the places that they are when they're experiencing breast cancer. So lots of exciting things on the horizon.
Wow, bring on 2026 and the next 5 years.
I love it. I love the 5 years, the 5 things. And I'm so excited and sort of almost relieved that you're picking up the, like what happens after treatment, because I think the sense of abandonment and, and fear and anxiety is real. And, there's so much. It's another podcast, unhelpful kind of narrative around, you go back to normal, just forget about it, live your life. You will never be the same again. You will never have a pain in your body and be able to just go, that's just a twinge. It will always be something that happens. So well done. Breast cancer now for picking that up. It's so important.
And you're right, Rebecca, we hear it again and again. And actually, I think the change for us is, instead of thinking, well, what, how can we help with information? Actually, the change for us is like, we need to do more in that space because others aren't, that we know that, to your point, often at the end of treatment, people are left. So actually us really taking, kind of control of that and wanting to be there and think really creatively and, really differently about what that might look like. Because, as you say, that can be a number of years that people can be, it's not a kind of 1 year fix, it's something that lives with you. And so actually thinking about how we really play a role in that space over time is really important, but needs quite big and creative thinking, I think, and what we do.
And just picking on that sort of point about creative thinking, and so you've got this brilliant strategy and there's a sort of North Star and there's a sort of, I guess, a programmatic thematic view that you'll be taking. And within that, there will still be elements of kind of innovation that's needed, sort of test and learn. And I'm wondering, particularly in your space, there's often an assumption that, we put forward business cases and this is a thing and we know for certain it's going to work. And actually we need to just test it and experiment and innovate or evolve. And how do you sort of tackle that or hold that in your role? Because obviously there's limited budget. No one wants to make a mistake or spend money sort of needlessly, but also we're not fortune tellers either.
Absolutely. No, it's such an important point and question. And actually some of it, I think, has been us being open and honest in what we do know and where we do need to dial something up, do more of it, and where we know where we need to be, the space we need to be in or the change we need to make, but actually we don't know how to do it yet. And that's sometimes hard. And again, like as a leader, you're always keen to give everyone the answers, like this is how it will work and it will be here by year 3. But actually being able to say, a bit like that point around end of treatment, we know it's really important for people. We know we have to play a role there because others aren't, but how that looks, we don't yet know. And also over the course of our strategy, to our earlier point, how technology will change and how we might be able to fill that space will really grow and evolve. So it's part of it is like culture change, part of it is giving people the freedom to not know all the answers and to think about testing and learning, as you say, and some of it is being okay with failure if things don't work first and foremost. But for sure, it's going to have to be a big part of our new strategy. And, as part of we've done some change to structure, and as part of that, our strategy and insight team also now will have more of a remit around innovation, not to only house it in that area, but to really help us cross-organisationally to think about innovation and constant improvement and all of those things that you talk about. So, really, really important part of our new strategy.
Amazing. We could talk for, I think, 5 years carrying on the mission. But thank you so much, Rachael, for spending some time with us, and to you, Rebecca, for always being so graceful and open with your own personal journey, because that just adds extra kind of importance for me personally and the team at Manifesto, that we are doing the best we can, but also more for breast cancer now. So
absolutely,
thank you so much.
should we ask our one last question?
Yeah.
If there's just a piece of sort of leadership experience, sort of advice that you would share with someone else, or leave behind, or give back to your past self or the younger women coming through, what would it be?
Well, perhaps it's that point that we just talked about not always having all of the answers, and that being okay. And actually, all you can do is really be open and honest about the things that you do know and the things that you really hold dear in terms of where you need to get to, and actually leaning on other people's experience, finding your way actually is absolutely fine. I think, it's I remember the first time I started working with a team where they had much more specialist knowledge than I did. And I was terrified because I was like, I don't know the answers. And actually being okay with that. And obviously where I am now, I work with an amazing team that all have a lot more knowledge than me. So being okay with that and creating the space for them to thrive, in the same way that we're talking about Kath, her experience and knowledge is huge. But actually what I can do as a leader is be there to listen, support, let her be her best self and her team to thrive. So I think that's a kind of lesson that, early on in your leadership career sometimes is hard to accept, but it's just a really natural part of leadership. So yeah, possibly telling myself that a few years ago.
Brilliant. Thank you. Here's to not knowing.
Yeah.